Hi all. Can you hear me?
Hello. Yeah.
Okay, good. Let me share my screen. So you can see the HackMD page now, yeah?
Yep.
Okay, good. So while we wait for others to join, I can talk about this HackMD migration. So as we discussed during the previous meeting 2 weeks ago, we said we will migrate to HackMD because it looks easy to use and it reduces the effort we spent to keep the notes on Google Docs and then sync them back to GitHub. So we tried that and it works fine as far as I can tell. And because of that, I took the previous Word doc or Google Doc document to read-only mode. And I will keep it there as historical reference. But from this weekend onwards, we will switch to hackmd.io. So as usual, if you can add your names under participants for today's meeting, we can verify that it works for everyone. You just click this pen, whatever sign, and then you should be able to edit the document. I believe Tracy fixed the anonymous write access. You can see people are typing. And we will be taking notes here directly. And then when we push this, it syncs back to CDF repo, SIG repo under the name of HackMD bot, which is also good because these are meeting minutes. And see how it goes. So apart from that, we have the agenda available already, starting with action item review, followed by a quick update about the newsletter. And the reason why I have newsletter in the agenda is this month's May theme is interoperability, and I believe it will go out either today or tomorrow, followed by SIG update to talk. We have a scheduled, we have time in next week's talk meeting, which I want to go through slides quickly. And then there was a pull request proposal for new SIG working group on CI robots, and I reached out to Max and invited him to our meeting. We will have a discussion on that. And for the second half of the meeting, we will have a presentation from Stefan on Flagger. And as usual, if you have any additional topic you want to discuss, please add that to agenda and we see if we have time to discuss that. So let's start. I think we have more people now, and I don't remember any action point from the previous meeting. I don't see any there except the HackMD migration, which we completed. So we can move to the next one, which is CDF newsletter. Tracy.
Hey, everybody. Yes, I believe the CDF newsletter with the interoperability theme is all set to go out. All the articles were submitted last week, and I believe it's slightly been held up. I think there's a backlog on the technology from Linux Foundation, but my understanding is it's going out today or definitely latest tomorrow. So yeah, many thanks to all the folks who wrote articles for that. So I think we've got a lot of features on the project and the vocabulary, which I think using the Rosetta Stone term as well, which I think I've been getting a lot of interest from when I talk about it. Additionally, well, actually, first on the newsletter, if you haven't subscribed to it, please do go ahead and I'll pop the link in there. And please share it. And if we're looking to get some of these articles posted on other sites afterwards, if you know of anyone who'd be interested, let us know. And then one thing following off the back of that, there is going to be a CDF podcast. So if you haven't seen, CDF has kicked off some podcasts now. And so we've got some of the authors of the post who are going to do a little panel on interoperability. So I believe Fatih will be there, and Kara as well. And we've got some folks from Puppet as well who'll be joining that podcast. So watch out for that. And I'll share some links in the Slack once we know when that's going to go live. Great. I think that's it, unless any questions or comments. Okay, I'll leave it then. I'm going to go look for the link for the subscribing.
Yeah, thank you. So the next topic on the agenda, there was a discussion during last week's technical oversight committee meeting, Tuesday last week. And one of the discussion topics was to ask SIGs to come and present to talk, so talk can be aware of what's happening and what kind of work the SIGs are doing. And we volunteered to present that as the first SIG. And I have few slides I want to go through quickly. And the slides are already linked in the meeting minutes. And please feel free to update slides directly if you see anything missing there, or ask questions, add comments, and so on. So it's like 6 slides. The first slide basically talks about what this SIG is about, when it was approved, and what are our aims and so on, followed by what we actually aim to do with the SIG. This is not the complete list because we have lots of things to do. We have ambitions, but we have to start from somewhere. And the 4 things listed on this slide is basically we want to follow CDF mantra, and we want to provide neutral forum for everyone from different communities, companies, projects, including users, to have discussion and have that discussion in neutral forum, thus enabling the dialogue. And we also need to ensure the share the knowledge between different projects and from projects, between projects and users. And finally, the main item that we have been working on last couple of weeks is the setting the roadmap. So it's basically the updates around these bullet points. And again, if something is missing here, just add that. And providing neutral forum. And basically, I think given the trend we have been seeing within SIG participation, we have representatives from different projects like Tecton, Jenkins, Eiffel, Open Dev, Zool, and so on. I think we can say we are successful because people from different foundations joining to our meetings and presenting the tools, technologies they are developing, such as CDF, CNCF, Linux Foundation Networking, and OpenStack. And apart from the project maintainers, we have users joining to our meetings and having a chance to have dialogue with the project maintainers, passing their use cases and challenges to them. And when I went through the historical meeting minutes, I think we have about 10 people on average joining to our meetings, which is, I think, which is a good number because we are very young SIG. It's about 3 months before the SIG was approved to be created. So that is neutral forum slide. And please interrupt me if you have any comments. Don't wait for me to go through all of them. The other thing is basically enabling the dialogue. As you know, we have been having the regular presentations from projects and users to ensure that we have representation from projects and users. People can come and talk about what they are doing within their project, the latest developments, and how it relates to the interoperability area. And as part of that activity, we realized that it would be good to have this thing called vocabulary, which Rosetta Stone describes it pretty well. Thanks, Eric, for that. So that's what we basically started working on. And I think we have 10 tools, technologies listed in that document, and hopefully more to come. So we can really make this a Rosetta Stone for CI/CD ecosystem. So, and I see this as one of the very first contributions we are making to domain, because I don't think there is a document like this available that has terms of more than 10 projects in one place. And then knowledge sharing, this is also related to previous one. We have been having presentations from users and projects, and up to now we had 6 presentations. Today we will have 7th one from Stefan on Flagger. And even though this is taking half of our meeting time every 2 weeks, I see this as a valuable thing because it gives us different perspective, and it tells us what things are happening under these projects, because some of the activities these projects are driving, like Tecton work that's happening, or Captain or Eiffel, are pretty relevant to interoperability. And we will continue reaching out to different communities and users and invite them to our meetings so they can be part of our community. And we are collecting those presentations in our repository, available for anyone to look offline. And the meeting recordings should be on YouTube, CDF YouTube channel, but only the first one is available there. I opened the ticket or an issue on CDF Foundation's repo to get the remaining recordings available on YouTube channel, so people can go back, watch, and hear the conversations, discussions happening there, because they are also valuable to hear. And the last slide is about where are we heading. And thanks to Tracy, we start working on SIG roadmap document, and we need to continue working on that so we can really start tackling on some technical challenges we have in interoperability area. So any comments about the update to talk?
Looks pretty good to me. I think it's pretty comprehensive and hits all the highlights.
Okay. So as I noted, please feel free to go and update the presentation directly. And thanks, Tracy, for nice words. And thanks for driving the newsletter and roadmap work. So that was the update to talk. And the next topic on the agenda is discussion on proposed special interest group working group CI robots. I'm not sure how many of you have noticed this pull request opened by Max to talk repository. And as you will notice there, some conversation was happening because some of the keywords used in the proposal got our interest. It talks like integration between tools and so on. And then I thought, let's reach out to Max and invite him to our meeting and hear from him what this SIG working group is about, and if any questions from the meeting participants, we can get the answers from Max directly. So Max, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invite. So maybe I should wrap together my idea behind it, or the problem which I saw or see most of the time. So from background, we're integrating tons of Kubernetes clusters and tons of microservices. Means without automating anything, we are pretty much lost. What we recognize more and more is that a lot of projects are interested in to get this. I always compare it with the Kubernetes probot, which is around, which does, for example, all this labeling. And we have recently finished 2 projects, basically, where there was also a lot of motivation to implement similar functionalities, which most of the time end up somehow in, well, really weird scripts or some kind of pipelines or automated partitions in it, which interfere with the CI/CD pipelines, which was weird, to be honest. And I think it's missed a little bit the idea of what needs to be done. So I thought about it when I saw the CD Foundation. Okay, how this problem could be described best, and actually, what the projects are looking for is the automation before the CI/CD starts and after the CI/CD starts. Yeah, so the process of this labels managing, for example, where who get addressed or notified, for example, if there was a request, or if I want to qualify something. This is actually everything what happens before my CI/CD partially can start. Of course, you can integrate it directly into the CI/CD also, but then it's, I think, on the technical level, a little bit too much down to be visible for everyone. So if I have a specific group of users like product owners, or maybe in bigger enterprises, enterprise architects, or functional experts, which are not that familiar with utilize really technical, deep integrated CI/CD pipelines, then I need to have something which gets some of these processes firstly out of these and really make it visible. And yeah, in my proposal, or the better to say it's ideation, so it should be more meant to have a discussion on it, if it makes sense or not. I mentioned I think three tools. The one is the Probot, which I would say is one of the well-known or mostly known kind of what is doing it. There's also the Robot framework. Yes, for sure, it's a more testing tool, but it also allows makes it visible and communicated with the people contributing to a specific development or pipeline. And also GitHub has its own bot, which is an alternative to the GitHub Actions. And it's also more on this level of being a kind of communication interface between the pipelines and the users in the end. I hope I could somehow summarize it.
I think that was good. I work on the Jenkins X project, which we use a similar concept with chat ops around the comments. It's basically using the Kubernetes reference you made there with Prow. It's all the automation around labeling on pull requests and triggering builds and approving PRs, for example. We were using that to a point, and then we actually started using something, because that was tied to GitHub. We started using something called Lighthouse, which is basically for multiple SCMs. But we use this ourselves on our own. Actually, we dog food everything with Jenkins X project, and we've got maybe, I don't know, a couple of hundred repos that we have with this level of automation on all of the repos. Because when one repo changes, you also want to have to update up the downstream repos, for example, keeping things in sync. So having some kind of automation and chat ops is pretty key. So we're big believers in that as well. Yeah.
As I said, I think this is a really, really important component. That's why I'm not sure if CI robots, or however wants to call it, is a right wording for it. But when thinking about it, it's really about bridging this gap between the the human and the technical part of the whole deployment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we've kind of been calling it chat ops. So you mentioned at the end of the issue, the idea, and I think that is kind of nice, because you want to have, it's not just about receiving notifications. I think having that greater control and being able to extend it as well, so you can have your own, add in your own more custom automations as well. I think it's really, really good. I think it also creates a like you mentioned process just on the call then. I think that kind of developer experience as well, it really, really helps aid that, and how it helps developers having working patterns. Now, it doesn't matter what project they're working on, but having a consistent way of interacting with their CI pipelines, triggering builds, or approving, or anything, getting test results, for example, I think is really, in this microservices world, is kind of more and more important to have this kind of more level of consistency across from pipelines.
Yeah, a couple of comments. I think it's really interesting. Again, the same kind of things we're looking to tackle rear their head again, just, the different types of terminology. So you sort of use the robot terminology, Jenkins X is using the ChatOps one. And again, it sort of points to that need for clarity for the users. So we can move that forward. Hang on, my battery's running low. I need to go deal with this. But yeah, also I'd be interested in just ways we can promote the interoperability like across these two interfaces.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
I just would like to ask a clarification question. So the proposal for us here is to create what? We want to create a standard interface that basically all of these tools can adhere to. Is that, or any future tools like this can adhere to? Is that what the work would be for us?
I'm not fully sure. I think it can be one of the outcomes of it. Because I think also at the moment there is not that much on the market as open source projects which really being massively utilized. So I think there's still a quite big gap between that there's enough tools where we can think about, okay, maybe now they need a kind of standard interface, for example. But I think on the other side, it's kind of, I don't want to say pioneer work, but to think forward. As I said, as we observe, a lot of people try to do this with scripts and whatsoever self-written to integrate this somehow. So I think in a first step, maybe SIG is too widely grabbed the thing on it. But maybe to start, that's why I also wrote / working group, to start like a working group and to identify ourselves in this case, write a summary to it, what exists, how does it work. Then maybe we have also the first steps to get a little bit clarification on the wording, which would be, I think, at least a nice output of it. And I think through this process, then we will identify, okay, is this work group, does it has really any value? And what will be the target of it? Or do we say like, okay, maybe, well, we need to wait, whatever, 1-2 years until on the market there's a couple of solutions bridging this gap.
Just want to clarify something, because this proposal is on CDF talk level, and we are having this discussion just because out of curiosity. We are not discussing this because we are asked to approve this or anything. It's just to, have a dialogue, and it's not proposed to be under SIG interoperability or anything. It's just a proposal like how SIG interoperability was.
Yes, I completely understand. I'm trying to understand it actually. And the gap that was mentioned, I'm having a little hard time visualizing what is the gap. It says issues. What I see often is the last projects are teams trying to implement tools or write their own scripts supporting this kind of approach. Could I point that as to be the gap that's trying to be resolved by this work? I mean, for example, the robot framework is already a framework, and as such, as being a framework, it already has a protocol of doing things. I would imagine also interfaces for doing things. It already has accommodations for libraries and things like that.
Yeah.
Sure, what I'm just having a hard time understanding what the work would be if we started for a SIG or a working group to do. I guess the best thing I can think of is to come up with a standard interface that tools like Probot and Prow, which is Kubernetes based, and robot framework could adhere to. Would that be correct?
Yeah, as I said, I think this could be one of the outputs of it in the end. Robot framework, just to mention again, is maybe not the best example as it's dedicated for testing, but nevertheless, I think it would be interesting to see, understand, and then specify or clarify how the integration, for example, between a Probot or Prow to any kind of Git or GitLab or GitHub Actions or whatever is behind can and should looks like, because the integration done yet, for example, in the specific case, is really for the whole Kubernetes community. I mean, there's like 40,000 people developing around it, and there's hundreds of projects and hundreds of repositories which can utilize this. But you have a hard time to adopt it to your own tools, to your own pipelines which you have. Already because you have a huge amount of pipelines. So there's, for example, the question to answer how this should integrate into a pipeline. Is it just a simple one of the actions which needs to be taken, or can it somehow intercept the pipelines, or even the pipelines trigger this one? Also, I think already this is like, as I said, that's not a big, huge field with tons of tools around yet to be really 100% clear and precise how this looks like. But that's why I try to formulate just this human CI/CD gap into a way where you can say, okay, maybe it makes sense to investigate further into it.
I see. Okay.
I was going to jump in now that I've figured out technology. So one way I think we could approach this, like with the roadmap, Andreas Grimmed made the great suggestion, we break things down by tasks. What are folks trying to do, or what are the tools trying to do? And he proposed, an initial whole bunch of different tasks like pre-deployment and post-deployment. But for me, it would seem like, okay, because I think everybody understands one set of tools, but maybe not across the different ones. But if we could take it task by task and then sort of say, okay, these are the things Probot are doing, and this is how it's doing it. These are the things, say, ChatOps or Jenkins X are doing. And then we identify the common areas, and then we, again, just go through that process of saying, how could they interoperate? What are the common interfaces? How could we standardize this? So I might have a look at the sections in the roadmap, see how we can fit these in, and then ask the folks who understand the tools to then go in and comment and see if that's an accurate way to capture it. And then we can start kind of comparing apples to apples for the different bits of functionality. Does that sound good to folks?
Well, it sounds good to me, at least.
Yes, that's good.
Yeah.
And Fatih, I don't know if you have a link to the roadmap, so I'll just point at that section so folks have a.
Oh, I should have it.
I think, yeah, if you scroll down in the minutes, it should be in one.
Yes.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
So if you scroll down to, I think, the next section, so we've got now, next, Okay, so this bit, so this is based on the comment Andreas put in, and we're mapping out all sorts of different tasks. So this was his initial proposal. So I'll ask folks to take a look at that, see if it's a good division, and also with this specific kind of robot use case, I'll take a look and see if it's covered well and how we can talk about the different tasks that get done.
Okay, let me AP all to look at that section. AP. So please correct this sentence, Tracy, if I misremembered what you just suggested.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so we are approaching to Flagger presentation, but the PR Max opened is available on talk repo, so the discussion is not limited to this meeting only, so you can go and comment directly under the PR and keep the discussion happening there. And then the usual talk process will probably happen coming weeks, and this proposal will probably be reviewed, and they will probably look at the discussion under the PR as well. So any comments, just put under the PR directly. And we can point to this meeting minutes as well as a reference, so talk members can look at the meeting minutes as well. Okay, so the next topic is Flagger presentation from Stefan. So I stop sharing, Stefan.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you see my screen? Everything good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Hi, folks. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you, Tracy, for reaching out. I'm very happy to talk about Flagger here. I know Jenkins X is using it, but I'm going to do like a general presentation of what it does and what's on the roadmap. And please interrupt me during the presentation. I don't want to make this boring, so if you have any questions, please just ask. So a little bit about progressive delivery. I think James from Redmond came up with the term. It's just an umbrella term for a couple of techniques that you can apply to your at the end of your CD pipeline and do Canary releases, A/B testing, blue-green with traffic mirroring, and all these sorts of techniques. The goal is to make production releases more stable and less frightening to developers. And this is one of Flagger's goals. What do we need to achieve progressive delivery? First of all, we need the CI pipeline that produces immutable artifacts. For example, we cannot deploy to production the latest tag of our Docker images. It quite doesn't make sense, and I'm quite surprised after, I don't know, 5 years of Docker and Kubernetes, people are still doing latest deployments with the latest tag, which is, you know, I have to mention it every time. Don't do that. I don't know how Jenkins X does it, but I guess it doesn't quite work if you just override the latest image on Docker Hub. Another thing that, from my perspective, is a requirement is that the CD pipeline should have a reconciliation loop. Shouldn't just be something that reacts to things. I mean, most CI systems are using hooks. So you push something, it triggers a pipeline, and that's it. It stops. I think the CD pipeline should reconcile the state, and how this can be done is with something that runs on your cluster, detects unwanted mutations, alerts about them, if there is a drift in configuration, and then tries to reapply the configuration. Another thing that progressive delivery needs is a way to do routing, and not just layer 4 routing like the Kubernetes CNI, but something at layer 7 and understands the HTTP protocol, the gRPC protocol. You can look at headers, you can look at cookies and all this stuff, and take decision based on what's in there. And finally, the observability piece. I think here there are two types of tools or methodologies that you could use. One is you can get performance stats from the smart routers. Most service meshes or modern ingress controllers out there expose some kind of metrics, but you also need a tool that collects business metrics, so you can take delivery decisions based on those kind of information. The project started 2 years ago. We've set out some goals, and I think we checked them all this year. Of course, the primary goal is to give developers confidence in automating the production releases. Like, the idea is you can deploy on Friday. That's the idea. Don't be afraid to deploy and go home. Some automation should roll back or undo if something goes wrong. It shouldn't be you there watching Grafana charts and dashboards. And yeah, how we can give confidence in automation tool, of course, by allowing developers and operations people to define the validation process with KPIs, with thresholds, have alerting, and have, of course, a way to do automated rollbacks. One of the goals that I've set up quite early was, let's try to write as little YAML as possible, because we all know in Kubernetes land, it's all about YAMLs. And bootstrapping a Canary deployment with YAMLs can be quite challenging, and it involves writing a lot of things. And I'll show later how it can be done manually. And last but not least, the whole process should be able to be managed from a Git repository with no actual interaction with the cluster. So the automation tool should be able to just talk the Kubernetes API, and that's about it. So you can secure your cluster in this way. Okay, so what is Flagger? Is a Kubernetes operator. It's a very lightweight tool compared to all the other things that are out there that are doing this type of delivery. I've recently run some benchmarks, and for example, Flagger can do 100 releases in parallel, and it will use 32 megabytes of RAM and 100 milli CPUs. So because it relies mostly on Kubernetes events, and it has this state machine based on Kubernetes conditions, it's very lightweight compared to anything else. And it works at 2 levels. It uses an ingress or a service mesh to control traffic, and it uses Kubernetes API to mutate deployment services and other objects. Flagger started as a Canary release operator, and during the last 2 years have evolved a lot. Now you can implement a couple of deployment strategies with Flagger. Canary releases with progressive traffic shifting, A/B testing if you are doing things for front-end apps that need some kind of session affinity. Blue-green deployments with traffic mirroring. What that means, let's say you have a machine learning workload, you want to deploy a new version of it. a machine learning workload is idempotent by default, so you can just mirror all the traffic from the production one to the one that you want to deploy, and based on some metrics, you can decide if the new model fits the purpose or not. So the blue-green with traffic mirroring is specialized for only idempotent APIs. If you are doing, for example, traffic mirroring on an application that does, let's say, payment processment, your users will pay twice, right? Because those transactions will be duplicated. And last but not least is the classic way of doing blue-green for legacy apps and all kinds of stateful applications that write things on disks inside the container and so on. For those, you cannot apply these modern strategies. So a lot of people ask, hey, can we do blue-green the classic way with Flagger? And right now it's implemented, and you don't need any kind of service mesh or ingress controller to do blue-green deployment. It works with Kubernetes, any Kubernetes CNI. So how a Canary deployment looks like: you have version 1 running in your cluster. You want to override version 1 with version 2. Flagger detects that, and instead of just doing Kubernetes rolling deployment, it spins up V2, slowly routes traffic towards it. It measures metrics. It can alert you, and if everything is okay, all the metrics are good, or your tests are passing, then it will replace V1 with V2 in not at once, but doing a rolling deployment over V1. So there are a couple of stages in the Canary release. So to make it safe, to wait for connections to drain and all this stuff. The A/B testing, you can tell Flagger to route a segment of your users to the new version. For example, you can say, route all my insiders users that have, let's say, an insider cookie, or depending on what headers your ingress solution offers, you can say, I want to route my internal users, or I want to route some users from some region, if you have a region header and all these things. So here it's about how you want to do the A/B test and what information you have inside your HTTP requests to make this type of deployment. And blue-green, in the blue-green strategy, Flagger runs conformance tests. It can also run load tests. And if all these tests are good, if the metrics look good without routing any kind of online live traffic to V2, it does the switch from V1 to V2 the classic way. This is the most wasteful way of doing a deployment, because you need twice as much compute resources doing this. How do you actually define a Canary release? Well, Flagger is an operator, so it comes with a CRD. You have a YAML that you have to write. And there are a couple of things here. A Canary release references a deployment. So you don't have to define in here, in this resource, your actual deployment. It's just a pointer to where your deployment is. And Flagger takes over that, that deployment and does a bunch of things for you. For example, you can specify how your application should be exposed inside the cluster and outside the cluster. So you tell it your ports, you can tell it retries. Depending on which ingress or which service mesh you use, you have more advanced settings that you can do with the service. And the most important thing, you can tell Flagger how to run the analysis for your app, at what interval, what kind of thresholds, and what metrics Flagger will look to validate the analysis. Here, I want to say that the target can be kind deployment, a Kubernetes deployment, and recently we added daemon set as a second kind, and people are asking for stateful set. Stateful set is kind of tricky because a stateful set needs a headless service in Kubernetes, so routing traffic, a percentage of a traffic to a stateful set is very challenging because you don't have a single DNS entry in core DNS. You have an entry per pod. So I'm still experimenting with solutions to overcome that. But at some point, also stateful sets will be supported. So if you want to do this thing without Flagger, let's say you use something like Istio, you have to write a bunch of YAMLs. For example, you have to duplicate your deployments, your deployment YAML, the old deployment, the new deployment. If you have horizontal pod autoscalers, you have to duplicate those. If you have config maps or secrets, you also have to duplicate those, because changing a config map or changing a secret could bring your whole application down. Like most downtimes that we had in the last year from the cloud vendors were not due to a new deployment of the app, but due to a misconfiguration of that deployment. So duplicating all your configs and making sure you run an analysis for those is also important. So you also have to create service mesh objects, virtual service routes, traffic policies, and all this stuff. With Flagger, you have to create your deployment spec, Kubernetes deployment spec. Optionally, you could create an horizontal pod autoscaler, and that's the recommended way of doing it, because I don't know, traffic shifting with only one instance, a single pod, is kind of silly. So you should be able to scale based on the traffic or on the CPU usage. And so let's say you have these two Kubernetes objects, the deployment and horizontal pod autoscaler, and you create a Canary object that references that deployment. And all the things, all the deployment duplication, the cluster IP services, all the service mesh objects are created for you. And this gives you an advantage to move from one service mesh to another. For example, you can migrate from Istio to UpMesh, from UpMesh to Linkerd without changing anything, because Flagger will detect, oh, okay, now I'm running on Linkerd, and it will create SMI objects. If you move to UpMesh, it will create UpMesh objects and so on. So it makes it easy to, it's portable across different implementations. What are the supported traffic management solutions? It works with Istio, Linkerd, and UpMesh. And if you don't want to use a service mesh solution, Flagger also works with ingress controllers, with Contour, Glue, and Nginx. And the Canary spec looks the same. You can just swap all these technologies and it will work the same. How does Flagger validate a deployment? It uses, of course, the deployment health status from the Kubernetes API. So where is the Kubernetes API? Are the pods ready? Are the pods healthy? Are things in restarting? And all these things, all these classic Kubernetes information that you have all over a deployment. It comes with built-in metrics. So all these providers, be it ingress controllers or service mesh, offer through Prometheus two things. You can look at the request success rate. So you can detect if your application is returning 500 errors, 404 errors, and all these things. And you can also look at the request latency average duration. So you can say, if my new version, the average request duration is over 500 milliseconds, then it breaks my SLA and I want to roll it back. So you get these two metrics without having to instrument your application or build any kind of instrumentation in your system, because the ingress controller or the service mesh offers it for you, and Flagger knows how to query all this information. Other things added recently is the possibility to define custom metrics with a new custom resource called metrics template, and I'll show you in a minute. And another possibility is to use webhooks. So webhooks in Flagger means that you can define some HTTP endpoints, and something on that other side will run an integration test or a load test or a conformant test, and will report back to Flagger the result. And Flagger comes with a load testing and integration testing companion that can do, for example, Helm test, or you can write your test with bash bats, and you can also do load testing. Do I still have time? Yeah?
Yes,
Any
I
questions?
think we have 9 minutes.
Okay. Okay, let's talk about metric templates. So this is a new feature made a couple of months ago. At the beginning, Flagger was only about Prometheus. So, okay, Istio comes with Prometheus, AppMesh comes with Prometheus, Linkerd comes with Prometheus. So it was the natural choice to look at the Prometheus server and get all the metrics from there. But when we talk about business metrics or other things like metrics that come from databases and other sources, then people use Datadog, CloudWatch, and there are so many other metric providers out there. For now, Flagger supports Datadog and CloudWatch as metric providers, and it has it offers a custom resource called metric template, where you can write your query, and that query can have different parameters. For example, what's the target name, the namespace, and so on. So you can compose your metric without hard coding the name of the deployment or the name of the service. So you can reuse these kind of checks across multiple applications. And there are a couple of users right now that are using Flagger in production with Datadog, and some of them with CloudWatch. So it was a feature highly requested, and it landed right now. Another thing that Flagger allows you to define alerts. And at the beginning, when you install Flagger, you could tell it, hey, here is my Slack channel or my Microsoft Teams channel or a Discord channel. And all the canaries or the deployments that are running on your cluster, all the events were forwarded to that channel. Well, that doesn't quite scale, because if you have like 100 apps, 10 teams, not everyone wants to look at a particular channel. Maybe they use different other providers and so on. So to make this configurable, there is another custom resource called Other Providers. So you can define Slack, Discord, Rocket Chat, Microsoft Teams as the provider for alerts. And then inside the Canary deployment, you can say, for this deployment, I want to route the alerts to these providers, and I want to set the verbosity. Maybe the on-call team wants to be alerted only when Canary deployment fails and is rolled back, but maybe the QA team wants to know when a deployment starts and when it ends. So there are different levels of sending alerts also. About the webhook feature, as I said, you can, before Flagger starts to route any kind of traffic, maybe you want to run your integration test directly in your production system, because, well, staging should be perfect copy of production, but usually it isn't. So maybe you want to have like a final round of integration testing running directly on production, or maybe you want to define some smoke tests or some conformance tests that you can wrap with in Helm and in other tools. So the webhooks are different types of webhooks. This is the pre-rollout type. So before routing any kind of traffic, you can run this kind of conformance test. And during the Canary analysis, you can start load tests. Why? Because maybe you don't have traffic at the moment that you are doing the deployment. So if there is no traffic, Flagger cannot query the Prometheus server, for example. It will return like no data points, and your Canary will fail. So you can use load tests to supplement the lack of live traffic. And the load test component also allows you to bring your own testing framework. There are a couple of integrations there, and you can easily swap Helm test with any other CLI or any other tool that you may use. And the last feature is about manual gating. So Flagger was built to automate everything. So not all companies wanted that. They have I don't know, people that want to press buttons when something happens, and they want to be in charge of the deployment release. So how this works, you can, through webhooks, you can have confirmation rollout, confirmation promotion, and rollback. And you can easily build something like chatops on top of it. So let's say when Flagger detects a new version, it will tell you on Slack, hey, I detected a new version. Am I allowed to start the Canary deployment? So your Slack bot can do that curl command that's there and open the confirm rollout gate for that deployment. So the rollout starts, traffic gets routed. Then let's say during the Canary analysis, you want to roll back everything. Maybe it's not because of metrics, maybe it's a business decision. We don't want to deploy right now. So there is another type of webhook called rollback, and Flagger will pull on that webhook, and if the gate is open, then it will automatically do the rollback. So you can implement it through, I don't know, some Slack command. And a third thing is confirm promotion. So after it does all the analysis, maybe you want to do the analysis only for 10% of your traffic, and you want to leave the 90%, 10%, you want to leave this state for a longer time than the analysis time. So Flagger will ask you, can I do the final rollout? And you have to confirm it, and only then will happen. So you can prolong, for example, an A/B test for hours or days if you wish to do so with such a webhook. And of course, Flagger works in GitOps pipelines because it doesn't mutate the object that you are applying on the cluster. It creates this separate thing called primary, and it also detects config maps and secrets and duplicates all of that. So if you continuously run kubectl apply from, I don't know, Flux, JenkinsX, Argo CD, and so on, Flagger will not spin up new deployments all the time, because it has a checksum mechanism and detects if it's a real change or if it's a no operation change, and just ignores it. So it works quite well with GitOps. One more minute. Okay, what's on the roadmap? I want to improve the conformance testing feature. Right now, it's a daemon that runs all these conformance tests. So if this daemon for some app needs some RBAC or some service account, or needs to call something out, you have to bundle up all your role-based access on this single daemon. And this doesn't quite scale. So my idea is to use Kubernetes jobs, or let's say spin up a Tecton workflow and leave that workflow, do the conformance testing, and just report back. So imagine your conformance test must call some database, it needs an IAM role, but other conformance test needs to do just a ping, so it doesn't need an IAM role. So having Kubernetes jobs or dedicated workflows, then you can split up the roles and permissions. So it's not a monolith that has to run everything. Also, right now, the manual gating, what I've talked before, it's all these gates are in memory. So if you kill the pod, all the gates are closed. So for example, even if you say over the weekend, I want to do automatically promotions, if something restarts, then automatic promotions will not happen. So I'm planning to come up with a proposal how to do persistence of the manual gating, maybe through etcd or some other storage like S3. And something interesting is the Kubernetes Ingress v2 proposal. Maybe you've seen it in the Kubernetes SIGs. So it's a new proposal for Ingress. Ingress right now is very limited. If you want to change things specific to a different proxy, you have to use all these crazy annotations that you don't have validation and everything. So you can get up with like a bunch of annotations. For example, Flagger does Canary deployments with Nginx by setting all these things. So instead of having all these annotations, Ingress v2 comes with some well-defined types for traffic shifting, for A/B testing, that I'm so happy about it because it fits so well with what Flagger does. So even if no one until today implemented Ingress v2, I plan to play with it, and when some Ingress controller switches over it, Flagger should be able to work with it. So that's the end of my presentation. I have a couple of hands-on workshops if you want to try it out, and the link to the repository and docs. And that was it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stefan. Any questions? Quick ones, maybe.
That was awesome. No question.
Yeah, I have a question for you, James.
For me?
Is Jenkins X expanding the Flagger support to other things than Istio?
Yes, yes, yeah, absolutely. We're big fans of Flagger. I think you've done a cracking job, and the community you've got around it as well. So the answer to that is absolutely yes.
Great. I look forward to that. Because it's not just only about Istio, right? It can do so many other things.
Well, we've got some friends over at Glue as well, so yeah, Solo as well. So that's probably one as well. But yes, the other ones, absolutely, yeah.
Great, thank you.
No, thank you.
Yeah, no, it's pretty powerful. So thanks for that. Just a quick question. I just have to ask. So when you talked about like reducing the YAML, like how do you think you did on that, or how did you go about making sure there's less YAML to write? Just by referencing.
So the idea is that you have to have 2 Kubernetes deployments running in parallel. So if you do this manually, you have to copy paste your deployments every time you do a new deployment. Also, Flagger does dependency detection. So it looks at the deployment and sees what kind of things are there referenced, secrets and config maps. So when you change a secret, Flagger creates a copy of that secret, runs a Canary analysis for your change, and afterwards promotes that version of the secret to the new version. So if you are doing this manually and you want to defend yourself from config changes, then you have to have for each secret 2 YAMLs in your repository, for each config map 2 YAMLs, and so on. Right? So it trims down in half, and it also generates all the service mesh objects. So if you look at what do you need to do to make this traffic routing with Istio, you need at least 5 YAMLs. The virtual service, routes, and all this stuff. And if you change let's say you move to UpMesh, then you need to write other YAMLs and start all over. and Flagger generates that for you. Also all the Kubernetes cluster IPs and all this stuff. So yeah, it adds up.
That's pretty cool.
Okay, Stefan, as usual, if you can upload the presentation you have shown to CDF presentations repository SIG interoperability folder, that would be great, so people can take a look at it and perhaps play with the labs you have there links for. I can send you the link to the repo via mail, so you can send a PR there.
Okay, you said upload, and I was like, okay,
like,
yeah, okay.
Yeah, we get the slides stored there so everyone can look at them. And we are already over time.
It can be PDF or?
Yeah, PDF, whatever format PDF works, yeah. So we are already over time, so 2 reminders. I think we should all join to talk meetings because there are important conversations happening there, and it happens every second week. The next talk meeting will be Tuesday next week, and it happens on 4 p.m. UTC. So it's important that we as community there and take part in the conversations that happen in technical or site committee level. And the second reminder is about the next meeting. Christy will be talking about Tekton pipelines and Tekton catalog and Tekton hub, which is on May 14th, same time. So thanks all, and talk to you in 2 weeks. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.